On today's episode of Locked On Mets, we are picking up where we left off from yesterday's part one of this conversation as Mets author Brian Wright and I go through Mets history and talk about their past when it comes to general managers as we begin the Billy Eppler era of Mets baseball.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans who are listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Locked On Mets is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Now, on today's show, we will play part two of my conversation with Mets author Brian Wright, which, of course, began yesterday as we went through every GM in Mets history. Today, you're going to get to hear about, of course, the great Brodie Van Wagenen. Frank Cashin is obviously going to be a big part of this conversation as well. Before we get to any of that, though, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing about the Mets at justbaseball.com. And to reintroduce Brian once again, for those of you who did not watch or listen to yesterday's show, Brian has written the books Mets in Tens and Mets All-Time All-Stars. Great reads. You should absolutely check out. Also does some writing for Mets Mirage and has been a frequent guest on this show. So without further ado, here is the second part of my conversation with Brian Wright. We got next up here, Bob Scheffing.
Yes.
70 to 74, 4 out of 5 were winning seasons, surprisingly, but he never won more than 83 games. He was basically a 500 guy, winning percentage at 501. Yes, folks, we have not gotten to Brodie Van Wagenen yet. He is this far down the list. Brodie Van Wagenen, one of the best GMs in Mets history based on winning percentage. I can't believe that. Basically more due to a small sample size. But Bob Scheffing, 4 out of 5 winning seasons. Not that bad.
Yeah, but now we're talking about bad trades and GM having at least one bad trade. Not that this was really his decision, because I think it was more of a Gil Hodges choice, but the Nolan Ryan trade happened in the Bob Scheffing era. So there you go.
Oh, man.
But he was there with the when the Mets won the pennant in '73, so give him credit for that. He took over in kind of an emergency situation. Johnny Murphy was the previous GM, and we haven't gotten to him, but Johnny Murphy passed away after the '69 season, so he had to step in there. And yeah, as you said, I mean, the teams did fairly well. I mean, they were never bad. They were always good to great in terms of, making the World Series in '73. So again, but he has that one trade. He did the one here. I'll give you this 2 trades that were good. I mean, one, I think the trading of Rusty Staub in '72 was again a Gil Hodges, really a Gil Hodges driven trade. Also the trade of Felix Mian and George Stone for, I think Gary Gentry was in that trade. Anyway, getting Felix Mian and George Stone before the '73 season was his trade. So we'll give him credit. We'll give him credit for 2 trades, and then give him blame for one, I guess, if you want to call it blame.
Trading the best strikeout pitcher of all time. It's not funny, but it is kind of funny that you mentioned John Murphy, which we will get to at the end here. But I did not remember that he passed away after that '69 season.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was going to ask you if he rode off into the sunset. And I guess in a way he did.
Sort of did, yeah.
All right. So we have finally gotten to that point. Brodie Van Wagenen. 2019, 2020 didn't even get 2 full seasons. Technically, we got a winning season, a good season. 2019 better than I think when we look back at 2019, one of the better seasons in Mets history, as weird as it is to say. Pete Alonso, Rookie of the Year. Brodie's decision to put him right up. There was some bad trades. Robinson Cano, I believe, is coming back on the books this year. There was trades for Keon Broxton and Jake Marisnick. Let's give up 5 prospects for 2 fourth outfielders. What else do we got? I mean,
I mean, that it's gonna a lot of things I remember him by, and obviously it's because recency bias. I just remember Brodie better than any other GM. But it's also because of just not only the trade, the Jared Kelnick and trade for Cano and Diaz, but as you had mentioned, trading players for players that you could just get on you could just sign or get on the waiver wire. I mean, I remember
Yeah.
traded a prospect, trading a for a player for Jake Marisnick, or trading a player for Billy Hamilton, I,
I thought you
trading
were going to
players for
say
Dion
Ariel. They
Bostic.
traded a prospect for Ariel Jurado.
Like what? It's just these are mind boggling. I mean, this is let's face it, this is the uh um way of, I mean, this shows that you shouldn't hire an agent as a general manager, a guy who
Yeah.
has no general manager or any front office experience, because it showed. Because the moves he made were bizarre. And, I 2019 season obviously was a relative success. They almost made the playoffs, but I mean, you can't classify hiring Brodie as anything but a disaster. Because, and also, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Depleting the farm system,
Mm-hmm.
trading these prospects for short term players. That's why we're in the position where we need to replenish the farm system, and that's why it's kind of good when you let a Noah Syndergaard go, you get a second round draft pick that'll help fix this mess that Brodie helped create.
The one thing I will say for Brodie Van Wagenen, for one, I think that his 504 winning percentage is not indicative of his tenure, because if he had a full 162 game season
Yeah.
in 2020, he would have finished below 500,
Oh,
guaranteed.
yeah.
But the one thing I will say about Brodie Van Wagenen is he is the last vestiges of Jeff Wilpon. That's the encapsulation of everything Jeff Wilpon was. That hire, instead of hiring Chaim Bloom, imagine that. If the Mets had just hired Chaim Bloom, everything's different right now.
Yeah.
They didn't, because Jeff Wilpon basically wanted somebody who, they had those meetings. Chaim Bloom probably said, we're going to trade Noah Syndergaard and Zach Wheeler and maybe even Jacob deGrom right now. We're going to completely tear this thing down, rebuild back up. And Jeff wanted to hear what Brodie said, which was like, hey, we can still win, baby. It's all good. Let's do it. And what I still believe, people, when they, I say this on my show all the time, so I apologize to the longtime listeners who have probably heard this take a million times, but the Robinson Cano trade, the thing that people always forget is the Mets saved money on their 2019 payroll on that deal. They sent out Anthony Swarzak and Jay Bruce. Mariners kicked back cash. The Mets saved money and technically addressed two of their offseason needs, getting a middle of the order bat and getting a lockdown closer. At least that's what they thought they were getting. So Brodie worked under the constraints that he had to win now. I think that because of that, even though he was in over his head and he made a ton of terrible moves, I still place more of the blame for the Brodie Van Wagenen era on Jeff Wilpon than I actually place on Brodie Van Wagenen.
That's definitely a fair point. Because let's face it, Jeff Wilpon was technically the president of baseball operations, if you can believe that. So he had that kind of control over the moves.
And knew they were selling the team.
Yeah.
He was trying to win quick to get a ring before they were broke and had to sell the team.
Not even considering any long-term benefits.
Why would he?
You can, and yeah, look, you can still win in the present and think about long-term and building kind of that sustained success that I like to think that the Cohen era is doing right now. It's going to take a while, but that was not it was not something the Wilpons were thinking about, especially when they were selling.
Yeah, oh, it's crazy, and I think I'll always be shaped by the Brodie Van Wagenen era, because it was, 2019 was my first season doing this show, really hyper analyzing this team every day. So I'll remember it fondly. It was a good time for me personally. I love Thanksgiving. All the good food and treats, and dessert is always the best part of any feast. But maybe this year you want a dessert that's just not so full of calories and sugar, which is why it is the perfect time for Built Bars. Built Bar is the new holiday dessert. Feast on something delicious and feel good about it. One slice of pie can be upwards of 300 calories, and that's on the low end. Whereas with Built Bars, you're talking about 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, packed with plenty of protein. You can replace that coconut cream pie with a coconut Built Bar, or a raspberry Built Bar for a raspberry pie. There's tons of good flavors to choose from that will replace any pie. They all come low in calories, low in carbs, low in fat, but high in protein, and all come covered in 100% chocolate. There's going to be new surprises all month at built.com with limited time flavors. So check the site often, especially for a Built Bar Black Friday. So mark your calendar because that will be a huge event with all sorts of surprises. Go to built.com, use the promo code LOCK15. You'll get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. Go from Brodie, and the next on this list here is Steve Phillips. 502 and 469 record, very good 517 winning percentage, 4 out of 6 winning seasons. Steve Phillips did a pretty nice job, and then I guess when he didn't get the job done, he got fired.
Yeah, he was there when they made 2 straight playoff appearances, World Series in 2000. Made the trade for Mike Piazza, made the trade for Al Leiter, made the trade for Mike Hampton, which then turned into David Wright, drafting David Wright. Drafted
Jose Reyes, I would
Jose
imagine,
Reyes,
was signed.
drafted Jose Reyes. Steve Phillips, if you want to rank greatest general managers in Mets history, he's very close to the top. Obviously, we're talking about him as having a actually decent winning percentage. So, and I think about 97, 98, 99, 2000, those were all winning seasons, and even 2001 was a winning season, if I'm not mistaken. The other thing I remember is that he and Bobby Valentine, the manager, did not get along. And I remember in 99 when the Mets had I think it was a 7 or 8 game losing streak, which is rare for that team. Steve Phillips fired like every coach except Bobby Valentine. It was very passive aggressive, like, I don't like you and I want to fire you move to like just get rid of all of Bobby Valentine's guys in a way to try to get Bobby to resign, which he didn't, and we were the better for it. But yeah, there was definitely conflict between the two, and Bobby Valentine was a very willing combatant to Steve Phillips.
That's pretty funny. And I think as we get to the next name on this list, I actually wonder because sometimes, well, I guess there was the Jim Duquette year in the middle there, but did Omar Minaya enjoy the fruits of the Steve Phillips era? Because I mean, he comes in 2005 through 2010, 506, 466 record, 521 winning percentage. It was a 4 out of 6 winning seasons for him as well. Obviously the last two, I'm without even looking, I'm pretty sure it would have been 2009, 2010 that were the losing seasons. A really good era of Mets baseball. I mean, that's Omar Minaya was my childhood right there. David Wright, Jose Reyes, Beltran. Obviously, he signed Beltran, traded for Delgado, signed Pedro. The Mets were swimming in what was it? Madoff cash.
Yeah. Well, he was, I guess at the end of his time there, that was when it was when Madoff, the influence of Bernie Madoff was very present. But before that, I mean, right away when he took over, hired Willie Randolph, as you said, Beltran, Pedro Martinez, in 2006 getting Carlos Delgado. And
even the small moves, like who is the dude with the must? Valentine?
Jose Valentine.
Jose Valentine, Joe McEwing. That is just a nice team. Or Duca.
Basically built that. Paulo Duca was I think a really good catcher in the short term. Was very much a leader in 2006. I mean, built that 2006 team. Built the team. You think about it, from they were a last place team in 2004. David Wright came up. Jose Reyes had already come up. And with those moves, with Beltran, with Pedro, they got El Duque. They
Glavine.
Really, Tom Glavine came in
2003,
I think he did, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know, but before Omar. But he built that team pretty quickly. With Randolph in that 2005 season, they were in wild card contention, but they had like a 500 record. And then 2006 obviously was a very successful year if you don't count the NLCS. So I look at Omar and I thought he did pretty well. I think, and of course the 2 collapses of 2007 and 2008 are there, but I mean, I look at it more fondly, I think, maybe than some others. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think he had the right idea right away, and that could have turned a lot differently if 2006 turned a lot differently.
Yeah, and I think we talked about it maybe the last time that we spoke, and the 2007 2008 collapses, while they were devastating at the time, when you pair it against what we just watched in 2021, which was not just a late collapse and a surging team. We never give the Phillies any credit for what they did down the stretch
Mhm.
of those seasons to win the division. We always talk about the Mets losing the division. We never talk about the Phillies winning the division. But compare that to what we just watched, which was from the All-Star break on just utter disaster. I think that you can look back and it's weird that the scale that we grade on, but I look at the '07 and '08 Mets and even the 2019 Mets and I say, yeah, well, at least they were winning teams.
At least they had a winning record. Yeah, it's a lot different just because it's a very compressed collapse. 2007, 2008, when you were really, really, really thinking they were going to go to the playoffs and potentially go far. Where 2000, last year was a more prolonged. I mean, I guess it happened in a 2 or 3 week span, but I mean, from late July on to the rest of the year, it was just kind of you were just wallowing and you went downhill and then you wallowed in mediocrity for the rest of the year. So it was I think like you thought they might be okay. You didn't I don't know. For me, I didn't it was like maybe they can win the division. Like maybe 2007 you're like almost convinced they were winning the division and then it got snatched away. Where 2001 it was just like, "Ooh, maybe they could win, maybe the Braves won't catch up." And so it to me it didn't feel as devastating. I know other people might feel differently. Again,
Well,
recency
then
bias.
I got to ask, and then how'd you feel when the Braves won the World Series? Because I haven't talked to you since.
Not good. I will tell you this. Compared to 2019 with the Nationals, that being a Washington D.C. resident, really stung because I had friends who didn't watch baseball, who had never watched baseball, suddenly jumping on the Nationals bandwagon. And then also acting like, "Oh my god, you know how long it's been since we've won?" And as I've said to a lot of people, it was joining the marathon at mile 26. I'm like, "You were not here." And anyway, I could not watch the end of game 7 of the 2019 World Series. That's how angry I was. Whereas 2021, I could respect what the Braves did. I couldn't root for them because of like, my childhood. The night, 19 as a child of the 90s growing up and the Braves just always beating the Mets, late 90s, 2000s. I couldn't work myself up to root for the Braves. They had more likable players. Manager was likable. Um, you know, say what you want about the tomahawk chop, which yeah, could do without that. We could all do without that for what it stands for. But the personnel was likable. Um, Whereas the Astros, I just like Dusty Baker, and that was it. But I
Yeah,
was but I was rooting for the Astros,
yeah.
and because I could not get myself up to root for the Braves. So when they won, I was watching. I watched like the last out. I watched the on-field celebration, and then I turned it off. But I did not have the same feeling of anger. I was ticked off, but I was able to respect the fact that they did what they did. They came back from, as we all know, from what they did, where they were in late July, getting those players to the deadline and having that remarkable run. I could both be upset by them winning and also say, you know what, give respect to give credit to them for doing what they did. So I didn't it was tough, but it was nothing like 2019.
It is funny how where you are and who you're interacting with shapes that. Because for me, 2019 was better than 2021 because I'm not in DC.
Yeah.
I didn't see any Nationals fans. I didn't know any Nationals fans. I was just like, all right, they won, whatever. It bothered me a little bit, but that one was not like, and also that one kind of set up this one where I did not watch anything past the last out. Last out
Mhm.
happened. I turned the TV off. I don't want to watch the Braves celebrate. But at least I was like, all right. I remember what it was like to watch the Nationals win. This is as bad as it gets. It really doesn't linger. Like, okay, they're the reigning champions. Who cares? So, and that's the way I processed it. But yeah, I can imagine. I've been here. I'm in South Florida, so when I always say, for me, the biggest rival to the Mets that like gets me riled up is the Marlins, which is very rare, but it's only because I had Marlins fans on my travel baseball team and in my class all growing up. And anytime the Marlins beat the Mets, I would hear it. So it is kind of funny how that shapes us. BetOnline is back and better than ever, now featuring a new web interface for the start of the basketball season with more props, odds, and lines available than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the basketball and football action this season. Head to the new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit just by using our promo code Locked On. From basketball to football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. Bet online, where the game starts. And with that, we get to the best two GMs in New York Mets history. I think that, John Murphy, we should talk about him first. Technically, best winning percentage, but it was a 2-year run, 68, 69, 173, 151 record, all basically due to, was it a 100-win season in 69?
Yep.
And, as we previously discussed, kind of rode off into the sunset, literally. But obviously, just a great job building that championship team overnight, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, it started with hiring or making the trade for Gil Hodges as manager from the Washington Senators. And I'm trying to think of a bad trade. I mean, he made 2 trades that were really good. He traded for Tommy Agee from the White Sox. I believe that was his trade before the 68 season, and trading for Don Clinton in the middle of the 69 season. So which, helped, help fortify the 69 lineup in addition to the great pitching staff. So, getting the field manager, getting 2 key players went a long way to what happened in 1969. And unfortunately, as I said, passed away, I think, a few months later due to a heart attack. So, well, it could have been with, I think he was in his 60s, might have been early 60s. So for at least for 2 years was wildly successful, of course, culminating in that championship.
Yep. And it is interesting that the 2 winningest GMs in Mets history are the 2 guys that actually got rings. And that brings us to clearly the best GM in Mets history. Frank Cashen, 1980 to 1990. There was 4 rebuilding seasons, and then from there, 7 straight winning seasons. That's how you build a team properly. Interesting note that I found. Do you know how many wins the Mets racked up in those 7 winning seasons?
Like an average?
No, total.
Total wins, 7 seasons. Like you're talking about 84 through 90?
Yeah.
Oh gosh. I suck at math. Is it like some even number?
It is a very ominous number. It is 666.
Oh no.
666 wins. That cracked me up when I found that out. But overall, a 907 and 814 record, 527 winning percentage.
Yeah, I mean, this is without question the best general manager the Mets have ever had. If you watch the 30 for 30 documentary, and we talked about this on the show about Frank Cashen, you have to give him tons of credit for building a team from absolutely nothing. He came over. He was previously with Baltimore, and saw how well run that organization was through the late 60s and early 70s. Kind of brought those philosophies over to the Mets. Built mainly, almost primarily through drafts, from Darryl Strawberry to Dwight Gooden and to several others, and trades. The trade for Keith Hernandez, greatest trade in Mets history. Trade for Gary Carter, I think, is top 3 trade in Mets history. Hiring Davey Johnson, trading for Ron Darling, trading for getting Lee Mazzilli, getting like a bunch, Howard Johnson, all those guys, and as I said, draft and building through the draft. I mean, he already had Mookie Wilson before that, but drafting, like guys like Lenny Dykstra, who was like a ninth round pick. Those kind of moves helped make what eventually became a dominant team, starting in 84 through 90. One of the best, I think maybe the best winning percentage in baseball during that time. Granted, only 1 World Series. So got to give credit to Frank Cashen for what he built. And in the same sense, you have to give him blame for what he did after the championship, which was trading away Kevin Mitchell for reasons that really, were ridiculous and were unproven. and nothing to do with baseball. And he eventually became an MVP. Letting Ray Knight go, who was really the heart and soul of that team, even though he maybe only had a few years left, but still could have kept him around. Trading Lenny Dykstra in '89 along with Roger McDowell for Juan Samuel. So he is credited for building it up, and he's also blamed for tearing it down. But the pros certainly outweigh the negatives.
Yeah, 100%. I think that if we look back at this stage, when you compare his resume to everyone else that we discussed today, even though he kind of blew it at the end, you give him credit for, basically the best, or not basically, the best era of Mets baseball, hands down. So that was this week's Throwback Thursday. Honestly, it's going to be a Flashback Friday too, because I'm looking at the time, and this is a 2-part episode for sure. A lot of fun talking with Brian Wright about Mets history. You can find him on Twitter at BrianWright86. Still does some writing for Metsmerized on throwback Mets history pieces, I believe. And find his books also, Mets and Tens, Mets All-Time All-Stars. Thank you, as always, Brian, for joining me.
Thanks, Ryan.
That's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB Prospects. Hosted by my guy, RM Layton. Locked On MLB Prospects is the best place to go to learn about the stars of tomorrow. You can find Locked On MLB Prospects wherever you get podcasts.